Thanks everyone for coming. Let us know if you can't hear. It's a pretty small group here. We're going to get cozy over the course of the next hour and a half. And just so you know, we're going to keep this pretty interactive with at least 20 minutes of questions at the end. So start thinking of those, jot them down. I think that's probably the best way to help you get what you want out of it. I will introduce myself last, but I would like to have all the panelists kind of run through a quick introduction of what you do now, the path that you took to get there. And I know one of the biggest values of the panel is just understanding kind of what this industry is and how kind of advertising is different from marketing, is different from PR. So we're going to try to really build that into what we speak to today, so you can leave with a sense of the different industry possibilities. But with that, Larisa.
Hi, my name is Larisa Matz, and I work for Kraft Foods. I've been with Kraft in one way, shape, or form since I got my MBA at the University of Chicago back in 2001. I started as a contractor and just tried it out. It was a new industry for me. I came out of the banking and financial services industry and wanted to do something new with my career, and so took a contracting gig for about a year. And then a VP very eloquently told me by pulling 3 resumes off his printer that you really need supplier side experience if you want to stay in this industry. So I went to work for a supplier on site at Kraft for 3 years and continued networking with the different directors who headed up the business units at Kraft. And then ultimately ended up getting an offer from the Shopper Insight organization, which is consumer research. So it's not straight up marketing, but it's supporting marketing and sales initiatives and building strategies. And I've been doing that for the last 5 years. I've actually had 4 different roles at Kraft. So there's quite a bit of movement and restructuring going on, and there's always opportunities to do new and great things.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janet Isabelli, and I am the Vice President at Wagstaff Worldwide here in our Chicago office. Our agency specializes in public relations, primarily media relations for clients in the hospitality industry. So most of our clients include really well-known, high-profile chefs, restaurants, restaurateurs. We work with some wonderful hotel clients. The Trump Hotel here in Chicago is one of our big banner clients here in the city. Our company's based in Los Angeles. The Chicago office came second in the year 2000. I joined shortly thereafter. And we've since opened offices in San Francisco and in New York as of 1 year ago today, actually. The path to me getting to Wagstaff is a long and winding road. There was definitely not a straight line. I will say that it started with an interest being piqued during my Metcalfe internship at the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, during which I had an opportunity to work in the volunteer programs office doing event planning for the opening night 1998 gala. From there, it led actually to a part-time job my senior year of college in the marketing department at the Symphony. From there, working at Pizza Capri as a server. From there, working as a personal assistant, and no joke, picking up somebody else's dry cleaning for a year and a half. Which actually ended up being one of the most rewarding and enriching experiences that has circled back to my life in a very interesting way today. To then coming to the University of Chicago, working in the college programming office, actually planning this event. I think it was 12 years ago now that I planned taking the next step, to then finding my way in public relations through a whole interesting series of events that I won't bore you with, but has landed me at Wagstaff for the past 9 years. Our focus at Wagstaff is really media relations. It's linking our clients to journalists in television, magazine, newspaper outlets, online outlets. We broker cookbook deals. We broker television shows for our clients. And it goes on and on, but we'll get into more detail as the panel continues.
Hi, I'm Alma Klein. I graduated from the University of Chicago in 1998, and I've spent the last 11 years working for major advertising agencies. I got my first job at an agency that's now called Ogilvy Action. It's part of Ogilvy, and I worked there for 8 years. Now I work for ARC Worldwide, which is the below the line marketing services arm for Leo Burnett. And what below the line means is pretty much everything that's not TV. We do a lot of focus on shopper marketing. We do digital marketing, mobile marketing, some social media marketing. You name it, if it's not on TV, we probably do it. That said, I'm a creative director leading a team of individuals who work on Procter & Gamble's beauty brands from a scale perspective. So we bring Secret, Olay, CoverGirl, Pantene, Herbal Essences, and I think I named them all. We bring them together on marketing initiatives that bring all those brands together with a particular benefit. This is largely aimed at retail, so we'll be doing retail events at Walmart, at Costco, Sam's Club, CVS, Kroger, you name it. My career started at the University of Chicago. I was the Voices editor, which is the arts and entertainment for the Chicago Maroon. Really liked doing music reviews and art gallery reviews and theater reviews, and decided I wanted to have an internship at a paper called New City, which was an alt newspaper, alt weekly at the time. And they hired me as a promotions intern on the first day of marketing intern. First day of my internship, the marketing coordinator had quit. And I said, this doesn't really count as an internship if nobody's teaching me. But if you pay me, I'll take over the best that I can. And so they paid me, I think it was like $11 an hour to run promotions, and hired me full-time when I graduated from the university. And I spent 3 years there doing nightclub promotions, newspaper layout, assistant to the publishers, hiring and firing of receptionists and bookkeepers, and helping keep the newspaper running. Decided I liked the creative angle of my job and really disliked chasing after bar owners for contracts and getting them to pay. So I informed my bosses that I was going to be an advertising copywriter, and they said, that's really funny. You don't just go do that. Fortunately, I had collected a portfolio, which is the most key thing if you want to be a creative, of work that I'd done making postcards and print ads that had all run in New City, and brought that to what's now Ogilvy Action. Creative director gave me a chance, and my career, I've worked on Kraft, I've worked on S.T. Johnson, I've worked on Unilever, Marisont, which makes Equal Sweetener, and I've spent the last 3 years working on P&G.
Hi, my name's Gabe Sopocy. I actually work at the same company as Alma, ARC Worldwide. I am the senior interactive writer. My brand is Marlboro, and I am the leader of the engagement group for Marlboro. And what is meant by engagement is pretty much, again, Marlboro, as obviously a tobacco brand, can't do any kind of traditional advertising for the most part. Print is very hard. TV is very hard. Radio, you're never going to see Marlboro doing any of those traditional avenues. So as markets become more and more restricted, we have to come up with ways to engage people below the line, viral guerrilla tactics, mobile, art installations, parties. What is it that we can do to really engage smokers specifically, nobody but smokers? What can we do to get them to absolutely ask us to advertise to them? So it's a really restricted, weird part of the business, but I love it because it's a new problem every day, and I don't like being told no, so it's perfect for me. And to get here, I took a similarly convoluted path as Alma. When I was at the University of Chicago, I was an English major, but I ended up studying a lot of film theory and video art in particular. I wanted to become a filmmaker, so I went to the New York Film Academy. I ended up working at a TV production company in New York as an assistant editor. I moved to Toronto and ended up taking from that work entertainment copywriting jobs under the table, and built a weird-looking Frankenstein portfolio of that kind of stuff. When I moved back to Chicago, I shopped it around and got laughed out of the room every time. But finally found a creative director who said, you know what, kid, you're funny, you're smart, I'm going to give you a chance, and got hired. And here I am today. That's about it.
I'm Terin Izil. I'm a copywriter at DraftFCB, which is just down the street. And I do advertising a little bit more traditional than these two. I work on KFC primarily, and I do radio, TV, print, that sort of thing for them. And I also work on the Cubs, and yeah, I get free tickets sometimes, but they're in the bleachers, so it's not such a huge perk. And Volkswagen a little bit with their just direct to consumer, so a lot of emails and things like that. And then occasionally get pulled in on Kikkoman or some other cool brands. So I've been at Draft for about a year now, and my path was also a windy road. I studied human development and I graduated in 2006. And my third year, I decided I was going to try advertising. So I ended up getting an internship in Kansas City. I had no experience. I didn't have a portfolio. I didn't know what a portfolio was. But it was the same sort of thing. Someone took a chance, and I got the internship. I found a house on Craigslist. I moved there. I broke even or possibly lost a couple $100. The financials are still a little bit hazy on that. But I did that. I got a ton of experience, and when I came back for my fourth year, I turned my BA into something on brands and brand personalities, so I was still interested in it, and ended up getting an internship when I graduated at Chicago Creative Partnership, which was a really small agency at the time. Now it's even smaller because it went out of business, but it was about 40 people when I started, and I interned there, and then I got hired on as a junior copywriter and promoted to just a copywriter after about a year or so. But being at a small agency gave me that experience that I didn't have from a degree in advertising, and I think for me that was a better way to go because it was more hands-on, and I got to work on Shed Aquarium and go there all the time, and the WNBA team, the Chicago Sky, let us do some fun stuff for them, and Bob Evans Sausage, if any of you from the home of homestyle in Ohio. So a lot of just different clients where I got a lot of good experience, and then I ended up at Draft, so that's kind of where I am now.
And I'm Anna Bishop. I graduated 06 as well, and I'll be the moderator / pseudo panelist today. I am at Google. I'm a product marketing manager. I've been at Google about 3.5 years, and I've been in marketing for the last 1.5 years or so. I'm currently part of a rotational program that basically assigns you to different teams for 1-year assignments, kind of to force you to get a lot of well-rounded experience before kind of finding your permanent place in the company. So I spent my first year working on our enterprise tools, specifically search for businesses, which was a really good experience. It's actually more traditional than other teams at Google. So we did basically lead generation, so getting as many potential customers into the funnel as possible with pretty basic things like direct marketing, email marketing, a lot of trade shows and events, and then all of our online components as well. So we're using the tools that Google builds for advertisers like AdWords and AdSense, and actually using them ourselves, which was an interesting kind of mind bend to see the company from a couple different angles. And more recently, I moved to the Google.org team, which is our philanthropic branch, doing product marketing again. So I work on some of our green tools. Google Power Meter is an in-home energy monitoring device. So basically, that's an interesting play because we're both working with utilities, the device manufacturers, and users to just build momentum and usage around that tool. And I'm also working on Google for Nonprofits, which is a basic bundling of our tools for free for nonprofits to help them raise awareness for their cause and reach donors. But to speak to kind of how I got into the Google world, I graduated in 06 and then worked at the business school here at the Polsky Center before it was Booth on program management, so kind of doing everything. It was a really good experience, like all the way from answering emails and talking to business owners who come in looking for help to running conferences, event planning, working with some of the professors, and then realized that I kind of wanted to get into the entrepreneurial world, moved out to Silicon Valley, and then started at Google, kind of did the which foot can I get in what door as quickly as possible route. So I started as an administrative associate on the Google Earth and Maps team, which was fascinating work. And I sometimes it is picking people's dry cleaning up and doing kind of random stuff, but it's like an inside look at some of the most successful people at a really innovative company from the inside. So don't regret any of those 2 years. I learned a lot. We have a culture of 20% time. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but you're basically encouraged to spend about 20% of your time doing something that's unrelated to your core job. And it usually turns into 200% time because people are passionate and just like time doesn't slow down. So you end up working really hard, but it's a good way to kind of move up and around inside a company is to take on more. I know everyone's busy, and I think the first piece of advice we'd have is get good at what you do, but also be able to go above and beyond and look for other opportunities that you can actually create. So I started an outreach group to teachers using Google Earth, and then realized that most of what I was doing was marketing to them. So that was kind of my path into marketing. Realized that was what I enjoyed. But we can get into all those details. I guess now that you know a little bit about what we do in the career, we kind of want to start talking about the UFC experience and how that weighed in on our careers to date. So I think Terin can kick this off.
Sure.
As kind of recent grads. We might
The UFC experience has helped me a lot. I don't know how helpful the UFC was. This is my total honest opinion in terms of getting into the field, but I think it was more of a barrier getting in, but once I was in, I think it was really helpful. In terms of being a creative, a lot of people will go to a school that has some sort of advertising major or go to a portfolio school where you pay money after you've gone to undergrad. You pay more money and you go for a year or 2 years and put a portfolio together, and that's what you're showing. It's more important than a resume if you're a creative. And I think by going to the UFC, I had a totally different opinion. I had a different approach to creative, and I usually like to do a little more research than most of the other creatives. So I was working on this KFC thing, and I ended up reading 3 biographies on Colonel Sanders. And he said a lot of stuff that probably shouldn't be repeated, so I won't. But, it was just a different way for me to get into things and, a different approach. And so I think that was really helpful in learning how to think. And the other thing is criticism, because for what we do, we get criticized every day. And I have friends who have reviews coming up at work in different industries. And one of my friends was really nervous. And I thought, how does she not know how she's doing at her job? She's, isn't she getting feedback the rest of the year? But we're getting feedback on what we do every single day. And sometimes it's great and sometimes it's horrible. And sometimes your work is so bad they won't even acknowledge it. It's just kind of in the room and just sitting there on the wall, but nobody's talking about it. So I think it taught me, going through 4 years of being criticized all the time and getting papers back that didn't have A+ on them like they did in high school was really good for me to be able to separate myself from the work a little bit and go about it that way. And the other part of it, I guess, is when I first was looking into going into advertising, I went to CAPS, and they took 2 people to find the section in the book in the library on advertising, and they pulled out one book that was really dated and racist and sexist, and I wish I had it now because it would be a great coffee table book, but they weren't as helpful. And I've just noticed being asked to come back and talk to some of the CAPS groups, it seems like they're being a little bit more helpful and more networking, and we're all here too to kind of help you adjust your UFC lives to whatever industry you want to do.
I just want to emphasize Terin's point about the way you're taught to think and respond to criticism. Not only do you need a thick skin in advertising, but one of the strengths I feel I bring that a lot of my colleagues who went to U of I or went to Miami, University of Ohio, and have ad degrees is that I do more research, but also I'm able to defend my work because it's really thought through, and I can think on my feet and use the powers of discourse and argument. And I don't lose an argument among my colleagues, and they're, just a teeny bit intimidated maybe because everything that I present is immaculately thought through, and that's something that I think that the University of Chicago really gives you, is that challenging you to really think things through, defend your ideas, and make sure you only present ideas that are infinitely defendable.
I also think that the network I developed at the University of Chicago is really helpful. So as an MBA student, you do most of your classes in a team setting, and you're always having to hear different perspectives and other points of view. And it really helps set you up for success when you get into the workforce, because at a company like Kraft, everything is done by committee, by teams, with your cross-functionals. And I feel like that was really a huge element of what helped me be successful at Kraft.
Yeah, the other thing that I would add to that too is just the opportunity for internships through the Metcalfe Program and other opportunities that may exist through CAPS. But I will say that, when I had my Metcalfe internship at the Symphony, I think the Metcalfe Program was only was maybe 2 years old or 3 years old, so it was still very much in its infancy. But I will say that opportunity, being exposed to that opportunity completely took me out of that Hyde Park U of C bubble. I had zero idea that a job like planning the opening night gala for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra even existed. And to be able to take advantage of that opportunity and see a whole world of event planning and marketing and public relations and how they all work together just by virtue of spending 10 weeks in a place outside of Chicago's campus truly made a statement about my future career path. So definitely take advantage of those types of opportunities because they very well may shape the direction you choose to take with your career.
I'm going to echo what's already been said, but also point out that, at least in my role, being a generalist and sort of being able to think about a topic from a lot of different perspectives is super critical, and that's definitely something that I can attribute to the U of C education, just being able to be a generalist, be passionate about things. It's also a culture where you are kind of encouraged to bring your full self to work, which I know is like a buzzword, but you don't have a work self and your personal self, and people are expected to have passions and lives outside of work, and that actually makes you a better, more productive employee when you're there. So that's, I think, something that the U of C embraces as well.
Yeah, for me, I think it's similar. It's that culture of curiosity. I could not do my job effectively if I weren't always paying attention to what's happening outside of work, trends, reading everything that's out there, knowing about the art world. You never know what kind of information is going to come in handy, especially for the kind of weird engagement work that I'm doing. There's no way to really study that. You just have to be a very curious, interested person and just ask questions. And also, like you said, I probably like many of us, I came into this school a snot-nosed, pretentious kid, getting A's on all my papers, and that first C that I got that told me that I was average really knocked me off my high horse, and it was sort of like boot camp for empathy. and empathy is really important in this business. As a creative, you have to really be able to empathize with many different kinds of people. So.
And then next thing I think would be great to talk about is some practicalities of how to gain experience in the field, kind of how we were starting out, what we found helpful in terms of tactics or qualities that you need to have, and the best ways to gain experience and really kind of break into the field. But if you want to kick us off, Janet, I think it would be interesting to hear your thoughts.
Sure.
Not to surprise you.
No, not at all. Well, I think that, in a position like an account coordinator role at Wagstaff, which is considered sort of our entry-level role, generally the types of things that we're looking for are people who have an aptitude for interaction with other people all the time. There's probably not a day that goes by that I don't see at least 150 emails in my inbox and 20 phone calls that come through. And I think just that overall ability to handle that kind of volume, which I think really plays well into the volume I'm sure you're all handling right now in your coursework, but also the ability to navigate it with personality and with friendliness and with charisma. The other thing, too, is in how you respond. The candidates that we look for, whether it's internship candidates or full-time employment opportunities, writing is just huge. I can't underscore it enough. I was having a nice conversation with Colleen and Isis at our lunch roundtable today, and they said, what do you look for in a resume? And I said, well, why don't we start by saying what we don't look for? And I think that when a resume comes through and there's one typo, I go at it with a red pen or with my tracking on, and as soon as I see that one typo, it's in the garbage. And I think that that general aim for perfection, as awful as that sounds, when presenting yourself to a potential employer is really important, because in our business, we're tasked with representing clients who are giving us money to speak on their behalf, and to present them to a group of media who we hope will write about them or put them on their television programs. So anything less than perfection when you're representing somebody else is just not acceptable in the written word, in written form. So I think really, really solid writing skills. And sort of that ultimate, no one's perfect, we're all human beings, but I think generally speaking, that aptitude and that striving for being the absolute best in representing yourself and representing the clients that you have is something that we look for. So that, alongside the personality, alongside just a real curiosity about what we do, you were talking about reading and just having that voracious appetite. One great thing about Chicago is that you learn how to read, and you learn how to read really quickly in many cases. And we subscribe to 200 magazines in our office, and we're all expected to read them in some shape or form on a monthly basis. So being able to really not only read through them and glean something from them as far as trends that are happening in the marketplace, but the desire to read them and the real passion for identifying what the new trends are in the marketplace. So much of what we do, I think all of us at the table, so much of what we do is really trend driven. And we're as much on the PR side in the business of understanding the trends as we are creating them. And I don't think you can do that unless you read constantly and really have the will and the passion to doing that. So I'm sure lots of others, I could go on, but I think I'm sure you guys have some other ideas too of what you look for.
I hired a junior copywriter, unfortunately, from University of Illinois with an ad degree. But what really made her stand out among candidates who had a couple of years of experience, and she had none aside from one internship, was that her portfolio was thoughtful and it was diverse, but she also went the extra mile. She looked up the kinds of brands that P&G owns, and she went and created a fake ad campaign for one of the brands that we work on. Now, it wasn't a brand that I'm actually responsible for, but that she did the research and cared and went that extra step to do something that was thoughtful and original and would make her stand out among the rest was great. And most creative directors don't care if your work has been produced yet. So you can make spec work and fill a portfolio with spec work, but if it shows that you've done something in a unique way that's thoughtful and strategic and can articulate why you did it, you'll make inroads. It doesn't matter if it ever saw the light of day. In fact, 95% of what I do never sees the light of day.
That's higher than my percentage, I think.
To add to what Alma was saying, when we are looking at work, recently we're in a position to hire another art director to work with on our engagement team. And the recruiting staff kept sending us people whose portfolios were all right angles. Just everything looked perfect, but they were making ad work. And it's important to know that somebody can put together an ad and know about composition and have things look the right way. That's important. But to me, the people who really stood out were the ones who clearly had a passion for something. And by something, I don't mean necessarily ad work. It's good if it's ad work too, but the guy that I think of is, I don't know if any of you know Willie Cheer. He graduated pretty recently. He came to me, he was an intern at our company with his portfolio, and it was like mine when I first started. It kind of looked a mess. He had a lot to learn, but I invested a lot of time in trying to get a position for that kid at our company, because when I saw his insane, beautiful balloon art, I was just, moved that somebody could use their brain that way. And I thought, I want to work with that kid someday. I don't know how, and I still would like to. And it was because of that passion that he had for that thing, to go out and actually do it.
And your sidelines can actually help you in your career, too.
Yeah.
I had a daughter 6 years ago and started, what's largely derided, but as a mommy blog. And it became a fairly well-known mommy blog. And because I was able to connect and understand the blogging world from the inside and understand how social media worked when most companies still hadn't figured it out, it catapulted me to a position within a company that I really wasn't usually hanging out with the CEO and the chief marketing officers and that kind of thing, just because they could trot me out and say, hey, we've got a prominent mommy blogger and she can talk to you about XYZ. So whether it's, your sideline as a blogger or your passion for, rock music or whatever it is that makes you interesting, agencies go crazy for interesting people.
Also, it shows you can market yourself. If you talk to me about yourself in a way that engages me from the get-go, then I know you're good at this job.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, right now at Wagstaff, I can probably name 4 or 5 people within our company who are pursuing things that are their own passions but relate back to what we do. There's someone in my office right now who's pursuing her culinary arts degree at Kendall College in the evening, and the poor thing is like burning the candle at both ends, but she loves it so much. And how incredible is it? And she doesn't want to be a chef. She wants to write cookbooks. And how incredible will it be when she's earned her culinary degree for us to say, we've got a qualified chef on staff in our Chicago office. You need help writing your cookbook proposal? We've got just the girl. You need a recipe tester? We've got just the gal. And she's doing that because she has no idea I have this plan for her. She will soon, though. And because she's doing that, it's going to lend, and we have the openness as an agency for our employees to do that and have the flexibility. It's ultimately going to come back and benefit us. We have someone who's getting their sommelier certification at this time, and we've recently expanded our portfolio to include dozens of wine clients in Napa. And when it comes time for us to do a massive wine or spirits presentation, guess who's going to go out on that pitch? So, so it really goes a long way to have those personal interests, because you never know when they're going to come back and tie to what you do and how much your employer will really value you for those things.
Yes. And try to get your company to pay for them. If it's a company, they'll pay for them, and that's
My agency sent me to blog her, which was really just a personal perk for me.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, in the marketing research industry, I think what we really look for is people who understand the numbers and the data. So we, look at a lot of quantitative studies, and even if you're just looking at some qualitative information, the key then at the end of the day is how do you turn that into an insight and into an action. So what you're trying to do is literally drive either sales at one of your customers, like I'm on the Walmart team. So for me, everything has to translate into dollars at Walmart. But on the brand side, also, same thing. I mean, you're trying to really grow that business. So how do you take some information? It could be the same piece of information that your competitors are looking at if it's a syndicated study that's open and available to everybody, but turning that into something unique, or maybe combining 2 pieces of information and looking at that with a different lens in a different way that says, oh, hey, I have an idea that I could turn this into something different. So I would also encourage everybody in the room to really take advantage of different opportunities that you have along the line and creating your own opportunities, as we've been talking about. So when I graduated with my MBA in 2001, nobody was hiring. It was the end of that internet bubble era. And I ended up just through my network finding an opportunity to do a consulting gig, which stretched out for the course of a year. And that's how I really found out about marketing research, because as an MBA, I think marketing research is not really an area of focus. Marketing is, or strategy or strategic consulting. But the way I learned about research was just through my network and finding someone at Kraft who did this and who was able to give me an opportunity to work for her for a year. And then I decided, okay, this is something that I want to pursue. Now, how do I get better at it? And so that just not ruling anything out, like you were speaking about earlier, I think is really important.
In terms of hiring and qualities that we look for, Google is notoriously kind of tough to break into. But I think what's heartening for the people in this group from a liberal arts background is we pretty much across the board just want to hire smart people and then let them figure out what they want to do. So interviews, qualities we're looking for is creativity, obviously, a passion about something. I always want to get a read on what people do in their spare time. I ask them what they read, what's the last movie you saw, and tell me your review of it. So kind of getting a look at how they think, what they like to think about. And then also one thing I know you probably look at the advertising, marketing, PR side of things as where kind of creative people go, or the creative side of the business world. But I think it's great to have Larisa on the panel to speak to the analytical side of it. A lot of what we do is pure numbers crunching. It's research. It's understanding the consumer, whether that's in focus groups or out in the field. So there are actually a lot of different types of skills that you need, and whether you're kind of a generalist or you choose to specialize in one of those areas, I wouldn't ever rule out the industry because you are or aren't creative. There's definitely a place for a lot of different types. The other thing I would just add in terms of kind of tips for starting out, or if you think you want to go into this field, aren't sure, or if you know you do and kind of are just knocking at that door and no one's really answering, is like, get in there. If you know the industry you want to be, just get in there however you can. Move to the city you want to be in, with fingers crossed it all works out. Another thing that I love about Google that I think is a good lesson for anyone starting out in the working world is don't be afraid of failure. We have a fail fast policy and mentality, which is failure is fine as long as you do it quickly and you learn from it and you share what you learn with everyone else, and then you don't do it again. So a lot of our products don't see the light of day, like all of us here, or they go away very quickly or very slowly. Everyone uses these decrepit products that are still out there, but that's something to keep in mind. Just try it, go for it. If it doesn't work out, you learn something.
And definitely take advantage of the alum in this room and on the Careers Network. As an undergrad, I had looked on there, and there aren't very many people in advertising, marketing, PR, but there were a few. Alma was one of them, and I went to her not thinking, okay, she's going to see my book, she's going to hire me, and that'll be the end of it, but just to get feedback and to hear how she did it and her advice. And now we're both sitting at this table, which is slightly awkward, but it's just we're all here because we want to help, and we all have some tip or something, or know somebody who's in the really obscure field of marketing you want to do or whatever. And this agency life and the advertising community in Chicago and nationally is really small, so you don't want to burn any bridges, but at the same time, just sitting here, we've found 3 people that we know in common. So just always keep your ears open for who you know. I still have the Taking the Next Step contact sheet from the advertising people from when I came to this, and periodically if I was looking for a job a while ago and I wanted some people to review my book again, and I just pulled that out again. So just always kind of hang on to names and see who you know. The internship I took in Kansas City, where I knew nobody, and the first week I was like, what am I doing here? I had nothing to do in my free time. I didn't know anybody. I just threw myself into the work. The guy I worked for there is now the guy I work for at Draft. So everybody's always moving between agencies, and any opportunity you have, take advantage of it, because you just don't know how it'll help you out in the future.
Now's as good a time as any to bring up the fact that I'm actually leaving the company that I've been talking about for the last 15 minutes. So, but as of next week, I'm not sure if that email address in your books is going to be good anymore. So just cross that ArcWW right out and put Gmail in there if you feel like getting a hold of me, because I'm one of those people that she's talking about. I love talking to students, and somebody gave me a chance at one point, so I just want to be able to give that back.
And I should mention that when Terin called me, I was in no position to hire anyone, and now I finally am, and I would hire her in a minute.
We'll have to talk afterwards then.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I knocked on Cap's door. I pulled out that same book, I'm sure, from the bookshelf. I would say there was something to be desired, and I know things have changed, but that said, I found both of the jobs that I've had through U of C alums in my network. So just don't be afraid to email people. Be on those message boards, looking at people's emails. There's hope out there, and people really do want to help. I think we had a shared experience. Going to the college, I think it builds a lot of toughness and a lot of rapport, and people want to help. So keep that in mind. We probably can get through kind of one more theme. I think it would be interesting to talk about how technology has changed the field, how you see it changing and kind of shifting in the next 5 or 10 years or 2 months, because things change that fast. But maybe Alma, if you want to talk, I know your kind of blogging background and how the social media aspect did help you in your career.
Yeah, I would probably say without any doubt that every one of you in the audience is more technologically savvy than I am, because I'm practically ancient at the age of 34. That said, as much as you're reading every magazine that comes out and following the news and listening to the Twitter stream and just being a consumer of all media, keeping up with the latest technology is going to be an advantage, but also your age, people are going to expect it of you in this industry, and it's kind of a little bit of a golden ticket because of how quickly digital and mobile and social media are growing. Those budgets are ballooning while traditional TV and print are shrinking. And because you are a digital native and you have a social network and you can speak the language because as a consumer as well as a marketer, you're going to find that's a really good advantage. But never stop learning and trying to stay in touch with what the next generation is doing, because advertising as an industry is a little bit youth obsessed, and it's hard to grow old unless you can stay young.
Yeah, for me, I mean, the digital revolution has completely changed advertising into something. It's a completely different thing than it used to be, particularly for a brand like Marlboro, where we have, this cowboy figure who talks to you from way up here. You can't do that anymore. Brands are realizing it doesn't matter how big they are, they can't talk to people from up here anymore. People want to have conversations with brands. They want a brand that talks with them and enables them to a certain kind of lifestyle and understands them. So this old way of doing things is just, it's not going to work anymore. So brands like Marlboro are struggling. How do we keep talking to this generation? The way that we're doing that is we're using social media, we're using mobile, we're, all the things that you guys are very familiar with. So, those are definitely areas to keep building up on. Actually, the agency that I'm leaving for is a digital strategy and design agency. I've decided that that's really where I want to focus my career and build up those skills.
I would say that from a public relations standpoint, the social media world has become crucial. About 2 years ago, when every ad budget from every company bottomed out and magazines, I got my Bon Appetit. I remember it must have been like February of 2009. I got Bon Appetit and I almost threw it away because it was that thick. I thought it was like a promotional catalog. The public relations is so hugely based in media relationships. It's knowing journalists, it's knowing the editors, the television producers, the online editors, the bloggers. It's knowing all of these people. And in the year 2009, the freelance pool in the United States increased by 30,000 reporters, if that gives you an inclination of how many journalists that I know and that our agency knows collectively who lost their jobs. Entire magazines went away, entire newspapers folded, sections folded, and here we were, a PR agency who makes our money by trying to get our clients into magazines that were running very, very quickly out of pages for editorial space. And the response became social media and really bringing that into the fold, not as an add-on charge, but as part of what we do as an integrated public relations campaign for our clients. We moved quickly. We hired social media strategists in each of our 4 offices. We formed a social media committee that consists of those strategists plus interested parties from each of the offices who gets on the phone twice a month to really discuss the quickly evolving landscape of social media and brings that information back to our company. And it's full on. It's not just about building a Facebook page or creating a Twitter account for our clients. It's really about developing promotions and events around those types of social media outlets that will drive awareness and build their fan base. So it's a huge, huge part of what we do. The other thing that I will add about social media is just from a hiring standpoint. I'm sure that most of you in this room have a Facebook page, and I definitely encourage you to take a look at your own content and do some thoughtful editing if necessary as you approach this time where you'll be applying for jobs. When I get 300 resumes and I narrow it down to the top 10 phone screeners, before I even pick up the phone, I look them all up on Facebook. And I will tell you, the last round of hiring we did, the first 3 pictures I looked up were people, just their profile pictures. These are people who didn't even have access to their wall or anything else. But the pictures were clearly like, hey, ready to party shots as their profile picture. And those resumes went in the trash. Not because they're bad people, but because that was not the image that that's not the first impression that I'd like to get from somebody that I'm interviewing for a job. So thought it would be helpful just to bring that up because I think that's something that more and more employers are definitely taking a look at. And once you're hired, also keeping the content edited on your Facebook page. Create privacy groups so that your employer can't see your wall if you know you're going to be talking smack with your friends all day on Facebook.
Well, and one of the things I've always done with my blog is I've never written anything that I would be embarrassed for my boss to read. Mm-hmm. So I never blogged about my job search. I never blog about my sex life. And there's still a lot of content that I can make an interesting blog out of. Those were filters that were always in the back of my head.
Yep.
I just wanted to add that in marketing research, obviously social media is huge as well, because it's such a great medium for us as researchers to find out, well, what's happening in her life, in our consumers' life, in shoppers' lives. In fact, when the economy started doing poorly a couple of years ago, one of the projects that I led was understanding how consumers are making changes to their grocery shopping, and just looking at different blogs, you're able to find out, okay, so what are the changes she's making? Is she using her pantry more instead of doing the stock up trips in the store as often? How is she budgeting differently? Like, what kinds of changes is she doing? And it was just amazing. I was just amazed as a researcher, like how much information is out there, and you can literally just eavesdrop on these conversations, which was great for us. But in addition, marketing research has really evolved as a function a lot in the last 5 years, because we're going in store now and trying to understand how consumers are shopping differently. As more and more people are using TiVo and other ways to, fast forward through commercials, it's a lot harder to get them that way, to get consumers that way. And so really where the field is going is, well, you can impact people in the store. They still have to go to the store and do their weekly stock up trip or fill in, if they run out of milk or butter or bread or whatever, they still have to go to the store. So how do we get their attention in the store so that we can get more products sold that way? And so a lot of the things that we do actually have different iCam technology, or we've had consumers go into the store with a lanyard and it has a little camera on it, and they go through the aisles, and then we go back to their house and watch them unpack their groceries and tell us why they bought each product, what they were thinking. Then we have them look at their trip through the store and sort of narrate for us, okay, what were you doing? Why did you take that path? Why did you stop there? Why did you look at this? So there's a lot of different ways to leverage technology in our industry. In addition, one of the more recent things that we've done is use virtual store testing technology. So literally just recreate the shelf or the store or a section of the store on the computer and just have people shop virtually instead of going into the store and ask them questions that way. So technology continues to drive the way that we do our jobs in this industry.
I would say from kind of the perspective within, I think Google is kind of helping the pace of innovation just excel. I mean, it impacts our jobs and kind of what we do on a day-to-day. It also impacts where dollars are going, what consumers kind of expect out of campaigns, and the speed. If you look at the Old Spice Man, I mean, like the year's probably kind of banner campaign and the pace of production of that campaign, we're talking hundreds of videos over the course of a few days that they're pumping out. And I think that probably changed the game and will change how we think about what we do. Another thing to think about is how moving dollars online also means that things are much more measurable. Everything is trackable at this point, or almost everything. So you have to be a very thoughtful marketer. And everything is about kind of testing, launching and iterating, see what works. So you have to kind of get into that mindset too. It is an art, but it's also a science to some degree. Just A/B testing over and over and over and over. So I thought that was something interesting with technology. I also think some of the trends we'll see, one is personalization. Everything all of us do, everything is personal, and it's just getting more and more so. So whether that's location or network-based, we're going to have to start considering that more and more. Any final remarks before we go to questions?
I just one other thing on technology. From the other side of it, of how it's affecting people in the more traditional advertising, you have to make your ads smarter. You have to make them something, if you're watching TiVo and you're fast forwarding and then you see the Old Spice spot, you might pause or rewind or find it online and forward it to your friends. You've got to make something that people want to talk about, or a radio that, people want to listen to, and instead of listening to, their MP3s or Pandora or doing ads for Pandora. Something that's going to spark people's interests.
I think the last thing that I'll add about technology and how it's impacted our business is that, before, when you were dealing primarily with print and television outlets, there was a lead time that was required before something could run in print, which made giving an exclusive to a journalist a possibility. If I have a breaking news about a big chef change at a high-profile restaurant in the United States, that's something that 5 years ago I probably would have called Phil Vitale at the Chicago Tribune or Florence Fabricant at the New York Times with that information, hoping that she would run it and give it to her as an exclusive that she would run in the dining section of the New York Times. That is no longer a possibility in our world because Florence Fabricant, the New York Times, can't risk that news being leaked to someone else and a blogger posting it before she can run it in her print edition. So it's really actually changed the way that we pursue media opportunities on behalf of our clients. And whenever we give an exclusive to a journalist now regarding anything, whether it's a chef change or a new hotel or any sort of big news, it's 99.9% of the time going to an online editor. So that's really changed sort of how we think about who we're pitching and how. The other thing is that all of the print reporters who survived the economic bust are now also, for the most part, required to blog on behalf of their news outlets. So their job has doubled in size. And as publicists, it's become our responsibility to think about angles that we can give them, not just for their print editions, but for their blogs. And I would say that 50% of the journalists who are now required to blog at the Tribune Company, just as an example, are individuals who've been with these outlets for 20, 30 years who, honestly, the last thing they want to do is be responsible for writing 5 blog posts a day. So they need content. And as PR people, we find it, in part our responsibility to keep feeding them information. It's great for us because it's just more exposure for our clients in different outlets, but having that sensitivity to the reporters and their workload and their need for constant information is something that's really changed how we look at our business.
I had one final thought on technology and the speed at which we work. It used to be even 5-10 years ago where we had a number of days to concept, and then we'd FedEx out concepts and get on the phone with our clients. Everything now is turned around within 24 hours, shown digitally. We have to consider when we're doing a photo shoot, how is this going to play online? How is this going to play on an in-store piece? How is this going to play in a coupon ad or in a print ad? And a lot more considerations need to be taken into account because everything that we do needs to be kind of media agnostic so that it can work across so many different elements. How's it even going to work on, an iPad app or viewed on your iPhone?
We'd love to take as many questions as we have time for. I would just request that you stand up and say your name and maybe your concentration if you've declared, or kind of what you're interested in, and then your questions. Who would like to kick us off? Don't be shy.
I'm majoring in anthropology. I'm very, very interested in the sports and fitness industries, but I'm trying to figure out what position within that industry I'm interested in. And one thing that you mentioned earlier is that you worked with the Chicago Cubs and also WNBA teams. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit on that.
Sure. So I worked on the Sky for 2 or 3 years. And that was a challenge in itself because I bet before I said WNBA and Sky, most of you didn't know we had a WNBA team. So, there are a lot of challenges within that brand, but also a lot of creativity and flexibility just because the client themselves were excited about what we could bring to them. And with that, I didn't play sports in high school. I couldn't really tell you anything about sports right now. But it was, again, that passion and that curiosity that made me a good fit for the team. I was a Girl Scout, and I went to a WNBA as a little girl, so I kind of played off of that. I would go to a lot of Sky games. I would just sort of immerse myself in that brand, and we got to do some really fun stuff with that. And then on the Cubs right now, we're working on some print and radio, and we just picked that business up about a year ago. So this is our first time kind of getting in before the season starts and sort of branding that and doing holiday ticket sales and that sort of thing. But it's a similar thing. I live near Wrigley, but I'd only gone to a couple games when people gave me tickets before. but if you have that passion and curiosity, you can kind of get into it and learn about it. And I think the thing that's different from marketing a product is every year you have a new team, which means you have a new product. And, you can't play up certain players if they're getting traded, or if they're injured, then that changes things. I worked on an ad for Sylvia Fowles when she won the Olympic gold. And we had to have 2 ads ready to go, one if they won and one if they didn't. And I personally loved the one that if they won. So I'm watching the game, excited, hoping that they win, but also personally vested in the game, and just like it was a traumatic game for me. But they won, and the ad ran the next day, and it was fun. And so it's definitely a different type of product. And there are agencies that focus just on sports marketing or just on event marketing and advertising. If that's something that you wanted to go into. So you would have all the same sorts of positions that a regular agency would have, but it would just be focused on sports or events.
Yeah, I've worked on P&G's Olympic sponsorship of Team USA, and now they've expanded to a worldwide sponsorship. So that's been my primary experience working on anything athletic. But I would recommend, if you truly have a passion, there are a number of sports marketing agencies in Chicago, and some of them focus on marketing teams, but also they do a lot of work on finding places for athletes to get money, whether it's through PR or through an endorsement. And then I know one PR agency, I'm sure that you could speak to it better than I could, that's been a partner of mine out of New York, is called Taylor, and they are a sports marketing PR agency specialist.
Yeah, I don't know much. I don't know much more about it beyond what Alma said, but I do. We'll talk after this, but I have some ideas for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? How about in the blue shirt?
Yeah, my name is Thomas Cook, and I'm an economics major. I'm a 4th year, but that doesn't matter. I didn't go here last year. You were mentioning a lot about the advances in new technologies as being like the dominant form of marketing or advertising today. I was wondering if, say, going across different industries, how prevalent that trend is. If there may be some industries that where, say, new like online or social media type of technology is not as conducive versus other industries.
I guess my only thought is never say never. This is all very general speak, but even at Google, we just ran our first TV ad at the Super Bowl last year, which no one was expecting. And I think Eric Schmidt tweeted the night before saying, "Hell has indeed frozen over. Watch the Super Bowl tomorrow." So you just never know. People can, we've started digital, and then we're building in more traditional tactics as time went on. So you'll see things like print and billboards and TV now, even from Google. So I would say, even within a certain industry, you never know, and we don't know where it's headed. But maybe someone can speak.
I think a lot depends on the client, if they're and who they're targeting, but also just the speed at which the client can readjust. It seems like the smaller clients are online a lot more. The bigger clients, it's taking them longer to build that infrastructure and think of smart ways to reach out in that way.
I mean, even the companies that were, when I worked on Kraft many years ago, it was kind of stodgy and late to the game, and they won awards for an iPad app that they created for food. So, I mean, even these big companies are all on board. I can't think of an industry, even B2B and law are using all of the emerging technologies.
There's one more question.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Vivian. I'm a 2nd year visual arts and economics major, kind of weird combination. Ms. Bishop, you talked about learning from mistakes. So one question I have is, what did you not do in college that you wish you could have done?
Where do I start? Have more fun. I mean, we're at the UFC, but you will come out a really strong candidate. So take the time to explore totally random stuff. Do the study abroad. That was my number one opposite of mistake. I think best experience, best choice that I made at the university. Have more fun. See the city. Work remotely if you can. Take a summer. Work out of New York. international. You won't regret those things.
Have less fun. I wish that I'd attended taking the next step, for one thing. You're on the right path here. But there are plenty of opportunities that I didn't pursue. I had, amazing professors who I wish that I had kept up a relationship with to this day. If I ever want to do grad school, I don't know why I would want to do that, but if I ever want to do grad school, I now don't, I don't have contact with these people who I really admire. So, I wish I'd nurtured certain relationships, and there are so many opportunities at this school in particular that, I feel like I'm kind of getting some of that back now through my involvement with the alumni associations that I'm involved with here. But for sure, I wish I'd maximized my professional opportunities as a student.
They take advantage of all the, RSOs and stuff while it's still free to you. Because when you graduate, then you have to pay $15 an hour, $30 an hour for whatever classes you want to take. And, that's a great way to just explore and see what you're interested in, and maybe you can turn whatever that is into a career.
I would also say that while it seems like you're working really hard, I never had as much free time as I did as a college student. So take advantage of it, because you won't have your summers off when you become a worker. Unless you're a teacher.
Yeah. It's probably kind of trite to say, but like GPA and stuff, a couple years out into the workforce does not matter. Just really work on like the experiential stuff, gaining the experience, being open to new things.
Yeah. I had a question specifically for Janet, but I'm sure you'll all be able to address it in some way or another. I'm Chelsea. I'm a sociology for the science major. And I was really interested in what you were talking about in terms of paring down resumes based on just, the editing, the writing. I was wondering in terms of something like an interview, what sort of personality traits you're looking for, or what makes somebody stand out to you as really someone you want to, hire, not just based on their, road experience.
Sure. I think once you're in the door for an interview, it's really your opportunity to show your prospective employer exactly why you want to work there. It's your opportunity to show them how much you've been able to glean, how much you've been able to learn about their organization before you've even set foot in the door. I think for us, it's not a requirement that you have a PR or a communications degree, obviously, to work at Wagstaff, because I clearly don't have one, and most of the people who work with us don't have them. But what people do have who end up working for us is some sort of intrinsic passion for the travel industry, for the hospitality, for the restaurant industry, for the wine arena. And it could be as something, I was fortunate to grow up in Italy until I was 9 years old, and my uncle has some restaurants just outside of Rome. And one of my first memories, I was telling some people at lunch today, is making espresso for the old men watching the soccer games on the big screen TV, And, for me, there's probably wine flowing through my veins instead of blood. It's been that ingrained in me since I was yay big. We still have other people who work with us whose families do have international roots, and they've taken the time to travel the world at every opportunity they have. And so this passion, I mentioned the person who's getting their certification as a sommelier. This person knows more about wine than I could even begin to tell you about. So when you're in there for an interview, when you're at Wagstaff for an interview anyway, I think really showing exactly what it is about you. What is it about your identity theme that makes you a good match for this agency? It's not about having a 4.0. It's not about, how perfectly organized your resume is, although that will help you get in the door. It's really about why you're interested in the company, what you've taken the time to get to know about it, why you think culturally you're a good fit for it, and what personally you can bring to the table based on your interests and your passions. Hopefully that helps.
Sorry.
Do you want to go?
Yeah, in addition to doing your research, I think it's really important to be able to illustrate things and bring things to life through stories. So your resume is a great summary of, the facts about you. There are facts on a page, but really illustrating how you got to each step in the resume with, bringing it to life with a story is just so much more meaningful and will help you connect with the person you're speaking to. And also, I always find it great when people have done a lot of research and ask the right questions. So show a real curiosity for what they're interviewing for, and have thought through things. So like you had mentioned earlier, Alma, that you had put together a portfolio of some sort, or just really, or someone you interviewed had.
Yeah, it was a girl I hired.
Yeah, had done all that work. I think that is just so meaningful. Like taking the next step, thinking through things, and really showing how you could fit into the organization.
Yeah. I think there is nothing more deflating for me than sitting in an interview and concluding the interview and saying, so tell me what questions you have for me. And the candidate says, well, I think you've covered it all. Guess what? You're not getting hired. I think really coming, to speak to your point, I think really just being prepared and having questions, and even have to, worst case scenario, ask what a typical day of work is like at Wagstaff. Ask, what the culture is like at the company, and why you've chosen to work at the company for as long as you've had. Those are surefire questions that will get your interviewer talking, and will only increase, their awareness of your interest in what they do.
And also all of the questions we've been asked here about what's your career path, and, how did you find success, and what kind of mistakes did you make along the way? You can ask those of your interviewer, because at the very least, if you don't get the job, you've got some insights.
Yeah, exactly.
What I was going to add is when you're getting interviewed, you're also being interviewed based on your personality, because if I'm going to hire you, I need to imagine that I could work with you. Yeah. So it should be obvious, but don't be a jerk. Just don't, you're talking about yourself, so it's easy to kind of go on and on and on, but you don't want to do that. You want to listen as well as, be able to speak about yourself. So finding a nice balance between, confidence and, being a good listener. Don't try to make yourself the person that you think they want either, because people will see right through that. Be yourself, be confident, and, be amiable and likable, and somebody that I can imagine spending a lot of time with.
Would it be appropriate to ask them questions as things are progressing? Like, would they, want specific skills? Because I can speak to that. Like,
treat it like a conversation.
Yeah.
What to speak to?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the more conversational your interview is, the better it's going.
The best interview I had this past recruiting round, I always ask like a case, pick your favorite product, how would you expand it to X market, or kind of a thought through mock case, and we ended up talking about wetsuits for at least 30 minutes of a 40-minute. And you can just probe a lot of different aspects, but having someone who's interested in something, who's passionate about it, and then can look at it from different angles. And at the end of the, if time's flying and like you can barely get through what you needed to, that's a good sign of an interview.
I also think it's great to ask at the end of the interview, so how do you see me as a fit for the position? Because why leave it till the next round or the next follow-up phone call? Just ask point blank, and you can really start some good dialogue that way as well.
We are about out of time, but if anyone has one last final thought before, I guess one thing to leave you with is do reach out. Come of this panel, definitely. Good luck in your next 2 years or 1 year, and good luck in the job search. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you.